Okay, good morning. It's time to begin our class together. I want to welcome everyone here. It's time to start. And we appreciate your presence. Good to be with you. Good to see your faces. Man, this is a rough-looking bunch here. Yeah, you've had to endure, but I've been spared all this time. No, it's great. And it's good to be able to understand what people are saying without leaning in and saying, "What was that? What was that?" So anyway, it's good to see you. We have a beautiful day. Happy Father's Day. This is a special day that we try to honor and recognize our fathers. Of course, we try to do that every day. But it's good to have some special opportunities. We're studying in this class in the book of Ecclesiastes. So be turning there if you are not already there. And we do have a few video clips this morning that we're going to be looking at. There are four of them, actually. They're very short. And we'll ask that those be paused in between each one because we just have a comment or two after some of them. But some tremendous material. And this morning what we're going to be doing is finishing up here at the end of chapter 8, which we looked at last week. And we have some questions, study questions that we'll be looking at that are in your book. Now you'll notice that the lesson number do not always correspond to the chapter number. So for example, this morning we are finishing up chapter number, what is it in the book? Number 9, but we are studying from chapter 8 in the book of Ecclesiastes. But it overlaps a little bit with some material back in chapter 5, verses 8 and 9, so we've looked at that together. And it's under the title of Encountering Injustice, Meaning in Civil Obedience. And we talked about that initially last week, and we're into the study questions at the end of that chapter. So those are found on page 140 of your book. So before we get into our study, I'll ask Brother Mark, if he would, Mark Everson, one of our elders here, to lead us in a prayer, and then we'll study together, please. Mark?
Let's bow in prayer. Our Holy Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this first day of the week, for the opportunity to come together to worship. We thank you for this opportunity to enter into this lesson, this study. We pray that you be with Bob as he presents the lesson and to each of us as students, that we are receptive to your word. We thank you for the wisdom that you gave to Solomon on his request. We can read and study and apply them to our lives. Father, we're thankful for this congregation and the way they've handled this pandemic in the past year. We're so thankful for their willingness to follow us, as to help us to make sure that we are safe and secure. Father, we realize over the last year it's been a very difficult year for many in this congregation with illnesses and sickness and death. We pray that you'll continue to bless us. We thank you that you have been able to allow us to maintain and to continue to spread your word and have an impact upon this community. Father, we thank you so much now for this time we have to study. We pray that we'll be receptive to your word. Forgive us our sins. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Okay, in the beginning of the chapter here, in chapter 8 of Ecclesiastes, he had made some statements about keeping the king's command, in regard of the oath of God. And that oath of God may have been the oath that subjects were required to take in that day, oath of allegiance to the king. And of course, that was an oath that is sanctioned by God here. In verse 3, he says, "Be not hasty to go out of his presence," that is, the king's presence. And I think that carries the idea of disloyalty. Don't be quick to leave your post. Don't be quick to forsake the king or leave his presence in the sense of being loyal and in solidarity with the king. Remember that the king had great power. These people were living in an aristocracy or an autocratic form of government. They were living in a government where if the king wanted to constrict you into service, could do so very capriciously. If the king wanted to make you a slave, could do so without an act of Congress. The king had great power. It was not just a figurehead. We look at our friends over in Great Britain, and sometimes when we see their king and queen, we kind of smile, all that the pageantry and everything that they go through. You might say some of it is a little on the silly side, but it wasn't that way back here in these days. The king really meant business. The king was in control. He had absolute physical control over your property, over your life. And it was very, very serious. So Solomon is saying, understand the power that he has. Don't be disrespectful. Now, there are limits on, we don't just follow blindly, and he mentions that. And he essentially goes on to say that even the king must finally submit to death and the powers of God's creation. There is no man that hath power over the spirit, verse 8, to retain the spirit, neither hath he power over the day of death, and there is no discharge in war, neither shall wickedness deliver him that is given to it. No discharge, or some translations say no escape. So even kings must stand before God on the day of judgment. Even kings must die eventually and yield to God's law and God's creation. So at the end of this chapter, in your study book again, there are going to be some questions, and I'm going to fast forward to those questions, which is where we were last week. I think we kind of got down through the first few, and I just want to make sure there's no further questions before we move on into chapter 9 rather. We talked about this one, some ways that we can best honor our governments. Somebody handed me a note right after class that basically said, the way I think we can honor the government best is with respect. And I guess in a word, that sort of sums up our responsibility not to be disrespectful of God's anointed, as David would say. Question number 2, what most greatly hinders us from giving honor to whom honor is due, and especially for those in government? So we talked about that last week. Even though we may not agree with everything, and we certainly don't agree with everything, still we must recognize God's system, his anointed, if you will, his system of civil government. The powers that be are ordained of God, Paul says in Romans 13. So we need to show honor, give honor to whom honor is due. Question 3, what are some ways to combat injustice while still engaging in civil obedience? And I think this is where we ended last week. We must be careful not to be engaging in civil disobedience, right? The Bible says, obey them that have the rule over you, and submit to them, for they watch in behalf of your... I'm quoting from Hebrews. I meant in Romans. Let every soul be in subjection to the higher powers, for there is no power but of God, and the powers that be are ordained of God. Okay, so we need to be careful about not submitting to the civil authorities. That's not the scriptural approach. We must submit so long as it is not what? Contrary to God's word, contrary to God's law. Remember Peter's statement that we looked at, we must obey God rather than man. So if there's a conflict between the two, our choice is clear. We must obey God, but we need to There's nothing wrong with making our opinions known in a respectful way, combating injustice, speaking out in a Christ-like manner, but be careful about so-called civil disobedience. That's not the way that passage reads. And then the other question here, and I'd like your comments on this if you care to comment, has social media negatively impacted our ability to rationally approach political and social issues? And if so, how? You know, you would think in an age of technological advances with social media so available and prevalent, you would think that it would promote constructive conversation. You would think with more opportunities available to exchange ideas and thoughts, there would be more enlightened discussion like never before. But this question is, has it also negatively impacted our ability to rationally approach these issues? What do you think about that? Don, go ahead.
It seems to me that the use of social media has turned all of the things that we might be rational about into emotional issues. The comments that are made are to play on the emotions of either your friends or your opponent, depending on what the comment is.
Okay, all right. Turn them in, these issues, into emotional issues, emotionally charged issues. Okay, I think that's true to a large extent. That can happen. Chris?
Many years ago, opponents could sit in a room, have a debate in a constructive and amicable relationship. Society has made that impossible today, whereas when two individuals discuss a specific topic and they are opposed, it has become an enemy, you disagree with me, so I don't like you attitude. And man, rather than trying to search for truth, has become trying to search for emotional satisfaction instead of, Bob, why do you feel the way you do?
Right.
Chris, why do you feel the way you do? It's, Bob, how in the world can you think the way you think?
Yeah.
And that, so social media can be used constructively because I can have a conversation with someone in Africa about a specific issue, but if it is a public domain, people search out emotional issues and prevent people from having a constructive criticism by instigating anger and strife.
Right, right.
Paul specifically told Timothy to avoid unnecessary disputes. So
Yeah.
I feel social media can be used in a private way. If I wish to discuss something with someone, then I speak directly and only to them, and we can have a conversation. But the moment you allow your discussion to become public, you invite the emotional instigators into that discussion,
Okay.
and it becomes useless.
Okay. Be careful about that. Be careful about what the Bible says, engaging in disputes without profit, endless genealogies, he called them, speculations. Yeah. Good thoughts. Anybody else? Yes, Cecil.
Yeah, I think what's at the very root of all of this is pride and arrogance. The Spirit has continually warned us against.
Pride and arrogance. Yes.
If we allow these things to be prevalent in our hearts, we end up hating our neighbors. We end up
Speak up as much as you can, Chris. You're making good points, and I want everybody to hear you.
Psalms 101, verse 5 says, "Whosoever privately slandereth his neighbor, him will I cut off. Him that hath a high look or a proud heart will I not suffer."
Okay?
So when we began to put our own agendas ahead of God and ahead of God's will, then we became beginning to use verbal disputes over
Yeah.
social media over things that are irrelevant, basically.
And what happens, Cecil, when I say something on social media that you feel is an attack on you personally? What is your natural tendency to want to do? Fight back. You want to save face, right? I want to save face. That's human nature when we feel that we're being personally criticized. You want to save face. Yes, Barbara. No, you don't have to respond.
It's just like television. If you don't like something on television,
Right.
change the channel.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough to do that, isn't it?
No,
It is. Yes, it is.
I don't have social media.
It's tough when you get an email or a letter or a text from somebody that appears to be a personal attack that in kind, to sort of turn the other cheek. That's a tough thing to do. But that's kind of the Christian life, isn't it? You're going to receive criticisms, you're going to receive personal attacks. But in the context of respect for the government, respect for the law, keep your focus here. Solomon is saying, remember, he is God's minister. You may not agree with him. You may not like everything that he says or does, but be careful about showing disrespect. That's not the Christian way. Yes, buddy.
I had sent a reply, not a reply, but an email to Senator Manchin about asking him in a nice way to vote against this bill. I forgot the number of it. It seemed like it was a 303, something like that, where the LGBTQ
Right.
community has, I don't know, petitioned them to get this thing going. And if it passes, it means that you won't be able to get up there and preach against those types of sins and everything.
Did he respond?
Yes, he did. He responded, but at the same time, he responded to me on Friday, and I've been waiting till I calm down so I can reply in a nice Christian way. And I am going to respond.
Let me ask you, buddy, was it a personal letter or was it like a form letter? You could tell that he had sent it out.
No, it was personal. It was a personal thing. But he basically, just to sum it up, he's pretty much going to do what he wants. He's going to support the LGBTQ community. He's really feeling sorry for them.
Yeah.
And that they have been mistreated and everything. So he's going to support that. I have it here on my email right now.
Okay.
And, but I'm going to continue. I've been praying about it. I don't want to respond
Hastily.
and everything.
Right.
I want to think about it. And so, but I will respond to it. And it's fine as far as he needs to understand, we all need to understand. We're to love every one of them, everybody. It may be difficult to love some people, but we need to love the person. But at the same time, we can separate that love into the sin part and hate the sin. You know?
Right. Right.
And gripes me about it, and I'll push, is that our current Constitution gives everybody equal rights, period, without any modification whatsoever. You know, and then to go back to your social media thing, there was item number 4 there. I believe anything when it comes to computers, social media and everything. They're good tools, but Satan takes everything good that's out there and uses it for evil against us.
Yes.
And I still believe from the bottom of my heart that along with the news media and many other devices out there that's being used, keeps our country and the world divided. You know, it used to be like Democrats, Republicans. And like Chris was saying, they could meet in a room and they could have a debate. That has gone by the wayside because now, because of these devices, we have been divided into multiple groups across the country. And that's exactly what Satan wants, because now we don't pull together as one and fight for a good cause.
Right.
You see, because there's too much division. And that's what he wants. And that's
Well,
what this is all about.
the whole notion of respecting the government, respecting those who are in civil authority, is really showing respect to God. It's part of our mindset as Christians. We realize we're only here for a short time on this earth. And while we're here, we need to be respecting God and following God, because no matter which political party we get into, or of which race we are, or where we are from, all of these things are temporary in their importance. We're going to stand before God as individual souls, one at a time, and give answer for how we short life. So we need to be careful. And you know that social media can negatively impact our ability to lead other people to heaven. And we want to avoid that. I know there's tons of other comments that you want to make, and I've touched a nerve here. I want to direct our thinking to this other question here, and then if we have a little time at the end, sort of sum up. Is our greatest goal to save our earthly society? It really isn't, is it? I mean, we would like to improve our society from the problems that we see, and we can see them coming. But remember the goal, folks. Our greatest goal is to what? Is to serve God, is to glorify God, and to lead as many others to do so as we can. To glorify God to the best of our ability. Remember what Jesus said, I came to seek and to save the lost. So anything that interferes with that, that stands in the way of that, needs to be laid aside. Keep your eyes on the goal. I think that was the last of these questions. Now, before we get into chapter 9, and I do want to get this video clip here in just a moment, is there any other comment that you're just dying to make that, here on Father's Day, a time of goodwill and respect for fathers and treating your teacher with respect? Is there anything else somebody wanted to say? Jim, I'm going to give you a minute. Go ahead. Sum it all up for us.
That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm probably one of the worst to get politically too sensitive, okay, about things. However, when you sit back and think about it, you have to think about Jesus did not come to create a political movement. He came to teach people and save people, and the world was changed by his teachings, one person at a time.
Right.
Not by huge numbers, one person at a time. So that's our job, to try to save the world, save people, one person at a time, and when that happens, the world will be improved.
Okay, good. Good point. Good point. Don, something else.
I think we need to read, in Malachi's time, everything was rotten. The priesthood was disobedient, disrespectful toward God. The government was rotten. The society followed right along with it. through the whole book, one thing after another, God had his complaints against
Yeah.
the people at that time. But then you get down to the end of chapter 3, and it says there, but those that feared the Lord spoke with one another, and the Lord listened. Or the Lord wasn't listening, was the wording. But I think that points out that even in the worst of times, if you want to, you can serve God.
Yes. Good thing to keep in mind. Danny, did you have something else?
I'd like to continue Mother's thing.
Just don't continue too far.
I just want to make a statement that Senator Manchin needs to remember that his voting for that bill to give them people their rights, supposedly, is taking away our right of freedom of speech and making it probably punishable by law.
Yeah. Something very, very serious, very much a concern. That's exactly right. There is a balancing going on, not only freedom of speech, but also the freedom to exercise your religion, as we understand the scriptures to teach.
I wonder how
And-
many people here know that ministers in Europe get thrown into jail for speaking against abortion and against homosexuality. How many people know that?
Yeah.
Okay? And it's coming here. That's exactly what they're trying to do with this bill.
Yeah.
Okay? It's gonna come here, and only the people, the ministers of the official churches in Europe, the ones that won't things, are okay.
Yeah. It's easier to shut down your opposition than to seriously consider the issue. All right, in chapter 9, there is a great discussion here with regard to meaning in what you have. And this sort of segues from where we've been discussing here, but continues it in the concept of finding and encountering meaning in life. In terms of wealth, for example. In the United States of America, we remain among the wealthiest of the nations of the world. And the congregation here at Central, I think, is representative of that. By world standards, most everybody here, and can hear my voice this morning, is wealthy. And we have to be very careful that we do not fall into materialism, where wealth and material possessions take the place of Almighty God in our life. And that is really the thrust of lesson number 10, which is chapter 9 in the book. Now, there are some video clips that help us to focus a little bit. Brother David Powell, whom some of you probably know, has been a longtime gospel preacher in Jackson, Tennessee for I believe it's the North End congregation, and a professor at Freed-Hardeman for years. And I got the privilege of taking a couple of graduate courses with Brother Powell over the last however many years. Got quite a respect for him, and I think you'll appreciate, if you don't know him, you'll appreciate these clips. So guys, let's have the first of these clips, if you would, and then we'll pause it after the clip for a comment or two.
This past year in Europe, there was a 90-year-old man who survived the coronavirus. As he was being discharged from the hospital, the doctor informed him that he would be charged 500 euros for a ventilator that he had used, but had only used less than half a day during his stay in the hospital. The old man began to cry. The doctor tried to reassure him, if you don't have insurance, if you can't pay for it, I'm sure the hospital can work something out with you. It's then what the man said of the doctor that made the doctor weep. He said, it's not a matter of insurance or money. I have plenty of money. But I have just realized that for 90 years, I have breathed God's good air, and God has never sent me a bill for it. And I've also realized how miserably I failed in thanking God for the simplest of blessings.
As this virus comes to a wind down point, and we assemble here today for the first time without wearing masks in over a year. It really, I think, is an appropriate time to think about the blessings that God has given to us. The fact that we could even have that discussion about the government here in open and in public is a tremendous blessing. If that had happened in many of the countries of the world today, there would be soldiers at the door by now. And we wouldn't be able to meet here openly by next Sunday. The virus has caused, or should, I think, have caused all of us to appreciate more what God has given to us and the blessings that He has bestowed upon us. I appreciate that clip about the story of the man on the ventilator and having to pay that kind of money for a half a day's worth of oxygen. Do you have any thoughts on that or comments before the next clip?
We just take so much for granted, the blessings from God.
We do.
Such as the air we breathe, the rain.
Exactly right, buddy. We take it for granted. In fact, maybe we've gotten a little arrogant and prideful in it because when some of this is cut back, we really get irate, you know. Paula?
What makes me angry is when like on 9/11, when our government officials, and I will say, and maybe sinfully, dare to stand in front of the Capitol and pray to God when they never try to obey God.
Yeah.
Some of them never try to obey or worship God.
Yes.
And I think we're seeing that a little bit in how our president and the Congress lady is saying their church has no authority over that.
Right, right.
That just angers me. They don't know God.
Right? Of course, the wise man here in the book, in the chapter we just studied, said even the most powerful of men have to finally submit to God. That's the bottom line there, but they sure forget that many times. Don?
When we look at America, and we see a country that is wealthy in the standards of the world, and yet if we go around the world and examine the resources, the ability within each country of this world, we find that there's enough there for everybody. What has made the difference is because America's government, from the very beginning, dealt by Christian standards. And if you look at the rest of the world, the blessings that God has put in everyone in terms of resources, in terms of minerals, in terms of the ability of people to work and to grow their food, every country has what it needs. But they do not have governments which see to the proper use of that. Now, we're not perfect in America, but I'm tired of hearing America being criminalized for being wealthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're wealthy because of the standard that has been set.
And because of the God-fearing faith of her founders and fathers. And hold that thought, if you would, for further discussion. We're going to get in the sermon there just a little bit. Don't want to preview that too much, but that's kind of a good point. How about, Greg, the next clip, please?
James Dobson is the founder of Focus on the Family. He tells the story of playing Monopoly one night with his family, and he was killing them. He was wiping them out. He had all the great properties, Boardwalk, Park Place. He actually owned all of the railroads. Who does that? He had hotels on every one of the properties, and you couldn't go around the board without paying him money. He wiped everyone out. He took all of their properties, all of their hotels, all of their houses, all of their money. He said they got so mad, they got up and just went to bed. Didn't even speak to him. He said he sat there all alone. He's the winner. In front of him, all of his properties, all of his hotels, his houses, and all of his paper money. And then he said, I had to put it all back in the box. It was over. I was a winner, but I didn't feel like the winner. I'd actually taken from others to have what I had. And in the final analysis, although I had it all, I eventually had to put it back in the box. That's true of all of us, isn't it? As he closed that story, he made this observation: we are all headed for the grave. Every day we are one step closer, but we have no way of knowing which will be our last one.
Okay, when you look at the text there, this is chapter 9 of Ecclesiastes, beginning at verse 1. It says, for all this, maybe we can get it back on the screen, guys, if you can. For all this I laid to my heart, even to explore all this, that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of God, whether it be love or hatred. Man knoweth it not, all is before them. And then verse 2, all things come alike to all. There is one event to the righteous and to the wicked, to the good and to the clean and to the unclean, to him that sacrificeth and to him that sacrificeth not. As is the good, so is the sinner, and he that sweareth as he that feareth an oath. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that there is one event unto all. Yea, also the heart of the sons of men is full of evil, and madness is in their heart while they live. And after that, they go to the dead. So no matter who it is, no matter how rich, no matter how poor, no matter how godly or ungodly, all are on this common road, if you will. He says, while they live. And after that, they go to the dead. Okay, very profound thought. How are we using God's golden moments? Are we gathering up all the hotels and the houses and getting power and control just to have to, at the end of life, quote, put it back in the box? We still have to be thinking about what comes next after that, standing before God. Any thoughts or questions or comments on that? We're the ones who get, did you hear that? Don said, we're the ones who get put in the box. Chris.
You know, I think it's great that James Dobson came up with that analogy for us to relate to. Long before James Dobson came along, Christ himself spoke about the rich fool who had all these things, and he said, hey, I don't have enough room to build bigger barns and whatnot. And that very night, his soul was required of him.
Yes.
How often are we so busy with our lives and collecting things, or sadly debt, or all this other stuff, and that very night
His soul was
our
required.
will be required of us.
Right.
And then the question is, and whose things shall all these now be?
Right. Good question.
So James Dobson, you know, great analogy, and we can all relate to that, but it first came from our Lord.
Yeah. Okay, good. Good summary. Greg, how about the next clip there?
Someone recently said, we live in the most technologically advanced generation the world has ever known. We enjoy inventions our grandparents couldn't even imagine. We have smartphones, smart televisions, smart cars, and smart homes. No generation has ever enjoyed our privileges. If having more could make you happy, we ought to be the happiest people in the world. But we're not. We're miserable, neurotic, unhappy, confused, and dissatisfied. We're hung up, uptight, frustrated, and extremely materialistic. Our marriages fail, our homes break up, our children struggle, our lives don't hold together. We've got it all, and it's still not enough. But happiness doesn't come in what we don't have. Instead, it comes from learning to enjoy what we do have. Truly, the wisest man who ever lived once said, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for a man's life does not consist of the abundance of the things which he possesses." Luke 12:15. And then he closed that passage in verse 21 by saying that contentment and peace don't come from materialistic wealth, but instead, peace and contentment come from being rich toward God. The great apostle Paul once said that godliness with contentment is great gain, 1 Timothy 6:6.
Godliness with contentment is a rare thing these days. And in our culture, I think all around us, we can see that. But Paul says godliness with contentment is great gain. Let's see if we can squeeze in this one last clip now. Do you know how long it is, Greg? Well, let's hold that. We'll hold that till next week, Lord willing, and start with that, finish up. That's a 4-minute clip. We only have about 3.5 minutes left in class. I want to make just a closing comment or two. If we can get our text back on the screen here. In the overall subject of this chapter, let's not lose sight of the danger of materialism. And finding meaning in life is not accomplished by what we have physically. This is a lesson that Americans really struggle with. We need this lesson probably far more than many in the world do because of our circumstances. Look at verse 4 in chapter 9. He says, "For to him that is joined with all the living there is hope, for a living dog is better than a dead lion." And incidentally, remember that in that day, culturally speaking, a dog was not viewed as favorably as it is in our current culture. He says, "For the living know that they shall die," verse 5, "but the dead know not anything, neither have they any more a reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. As well their love as their hatred and their envy is perished long ago, neither have there any more a portion forever in anything that is done," what? "Under the sun." Now, folks, before we close class, let me give you a challenge to think about. A lot of people look at verse 5 and they say, well, this means that once you're dead all over, as they say. You have no knowledge of anything. You have no consciousness. But notice the qualifying words at the very end of that paragraph there, at the end of verse 6. He's talking about having no more knowledge of things going on where? On earth. On earth. When a person dies and their soul moves on to that unseen realm known as Hades, they are not unconscious. They are not dead, but they have no more awareness or knowledge of what is going on earth. They are no longer involved in that. I heard a preacher one time give this illustration, and I think this helped me to see that point, is that when people die, let's suppose that parents die not having seen their child obey the gospel or return after a period of unfaithfulness, and they die, never having that joy. But as others move on into Hades, think of the information that is conveyed. I want you to know, brother so-and-so, your son obeyed the gospel last week. Your daughter, who was unfaithful, was restored last year. Think of the joy that takes place in Hades even, when God's law is obeyed, the word is obeyed, and news is carried to that unseen realm by those who continue to go there from this earth. You see that? We may not know what's going on earth, but there are those coming every day who may be able to tell us something. The living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything under the sun. They have no more connection to it, no more reward, and the memory of them is forgotten. So think about that for next week, if you would. We'll look at that last clip and then move through chapter 9, the balance of it, Lord willing, at that time. Thank you for your attention and your comments today.